Chapter 7 of The Semi-Attached Couple by Emily Eden. This Librivox recording is in the public domain. Eliza's wishes were more than fulfilled, for the following day she received a very kind note from Helen, asking her to be one of her bridesmaids, and this was accompanied by a very pretty dress, with Lady Eskdale's kind love, and a note to invite Mrs. Douglas also to the wedding, and Mr. Douglas and Sarah to the breakfast that was to follow it. Mrs. Douglas could hardly do less than make a very great grievance of what was intended as a kindness. She hated a wedding. It was just the sort of thing that the world chose to make a fuss about, but which she thought the most uninteresting ceremony on earth. She did not see why she was to dress herself out in satin and blonde just to go and hear two young people make foolish promises that they could never keep. What could be more absurd than to assemble a crowd to witness a man and woman promising to love each other for the rest of their lives, when we know what human creatures are, men so thoroughly selfish and unprincipled, women so vain and frivolous? This wholesale way of dealing with her fellow creatures was one of Mrs. Douglas's favourite methods of treating them. "I should like to go in my garden bonnet and coloured muslin gown, just to show how I despise their love of fashion," she said, as she sealed the note to her milliner, which was to order the well-chosen dress and bonnet, on which she had determined for the occasion. For the energy with which she declaimed against dress did not at all interfere with her inclination to spend a great deal of money on it. So to the wedding she went, and this is her description of it. "My dear sister, you will expect to have some account of the Eskdale wedding, so I may as well write to-night, though I am completely knocked up. You know what a wretched sleeper I am, and of course I could not close my eyes till 5, from feeling that I was to be called an hour earlier than usual. And then, what with breakfasting in a hurry, and dressing, and fancying we were too late, I was quite ill by the time we arrived at the castle. Eliza was to be one of the bridesmaids, and Lady Eskdale gave her dress. I must own I thought it a shabby present, but as Eliza was pleased, of course I did not say so. When we arrived at the castle, there was poor Lady Eskdale looking 90 at least, though Mr. Douglas will not see how old she is grown, and the tears rolling down her cheeks, while she kept saying, 'We are to have no crying, that is all settled, and no melancholy leave-takings on account of poor dear Helen. We are none of us to shed a tear.' I am the worst person in the world, you know, to enter into these prettinesses. I could only say, there was no use in crying, or some platitude of that sort, for sentiment bores me. Lady Amelia stayed with Helen till almost the last moment, and then came and made the sort of fuss with her mother which all that family make with each other. Amelia's beauty is one of those delusions I have never given into. Large eyes and dark eyebrows, and a great display of hair, I presume it is all her own, and a way of playing her features about as if she were more intelligent than other people. It may be natural, but it looks like affectation. We all went in solemn procession to the chapel through rows of servants. What the expense of that establishment must be, I cannot imagine, nor how the Eskdales have gone on so long without coming to a stop. As soon as we were arranged in our places, Lord Eskdale and Helen came in at one door, and Lord Teviot and Lord Beaufort at another, and they all went straight to the altar, with a great tangle of bridesmaids behind them. I thought it all a most theatrical arrangement. Why could they not come like John and Jane Smith to be married like other people at the village church? Helen was so covered with Brussels lace that I cannot say how she looked. Some of the company, of course, declared she looked beautiful. I saw nothing but a veil, a mere lace veil. And besides, I have always set my face against the absurd idea that all brides look pretty. She shook very much, and though I am the last person from my friendship for the Eskdales to hint at the real state of the case, I have a sad foreboding that Helen marries with the prospect of being one of the most unhappy women in England. And I do not wonder at it. Lord Teviot is one of the worst specimens of the class dandy I ever saw, and I am much mistaken if his temper will not be a sad trial to poor Helen. However, don't quote me. You never saw such a frightful effect as the coloured glass had on Lady Eskdale's looks, and I think Lord Eskdale's hair has suddenly grown grey. It may have been the reflection of the blue glass, but it gave me the impression of grey hair, and I suppose all his worries must tell upon him at last. The chapel was all dressed out with flowers, and I could hardly attend to the ceremony. because I was expecting every moment to feel faint with the smell of the lilies and heliotrope, and then I thought I should catch my death of cold by standing on the marble pavement. To be sure, the manners of the present day are very different from what even I can remember. I saw Lord Beaufort shuffling a cushion about with his feet, and thought that he was of course going to give it to me to stand on, when he went down on his knees and began saying his prayers, without the least consideration for my chances of cramp. After the ceremony there was a long scene of congratulation, and we all embraced each other without sparing age or sex. I had a narrow escape of a salute from Robinson, the old tutor, and Lizzie was frightened out of her wits by a kiss from Lord Eskdale. There was a great breakfast immediately after the wedding, to which most of the neighbourhood were invited. Helen went to change her dress, and Lord Teviot stalked about amongst the company for a little while, looking bored and sullen. I always pity the bridegroom on these occasions. The bride is supported by her father and attended by her bridesmaid, and everybody is or pretends to be in a fright lest she should faint or cry, and she has all the protection of a veil in case she should be too shy, or not shy enough, and there is a general sympathy in her feelings. The poor man has to walk himself up alone to the altar, where he stands looking uncommonly foolish, without even the protection of his hat. There is the mother sobbing at him for carrying off her child, the sisters scowling at him because he did not choose one of them, the clergyman frowning at him for not producing the ring at the right moment, or for neglecting the responses in their proper places. The brothers laugh at him, the bride turns from him, and the only person who pays him the slightest attention is the clerk, who tells him when he is to kneel, and when to stand, and which is his right hand and which is his left, and helps him to the discovery of his waistcoat pocket, in which the ring may or may not be. Lord Teviot is not a man to look foolish, but he looked decidedly cross. 2 carriages and 4 were waiting at the door, and an immense crowd was assembled round them. We all went and stood on the marble terrace above, and in half an hour Lord Eskdale led Helen out from the cloister door, and handed her into the carriage. Lord Teviot stepped in, and they drove off, followed by the other carriage, in which all the dressing boxes and the jewel cases and the valet and the maid had been packed up for some time. You know that Lady Teviot's maid is that pert Nancy who originally waited in my schoolroom, and of course I am rather amazed at her presumption, calling herself Mrs. Tomkinson, and travelling in a carriage and 4. Lady Eskdale came back to the company, still crying, and still declaring it was the gayest wedding she had ever seen, and she was so glad there had been no tears. I was dead tired when I got home, and am very glad that the Eskdales have married all their daughters, and that we have no more weddings to do. Adieu, my dear sister. Is it true that your son has sold out of the 15th? If I were you, I would advise him to live less at clubs, and not to keep so many horses. Yours ever, A. Douglas. End of chapter 7.